Hey guys, how you doing? Today I'm finally back with a tier list video because, obviously, I had to complete the big three. Now before we start, I again need to give a disclaimer, which is, if I use the same criteria as the other videos, this one would be like 1 minute long. So the reason you can see consoles here like the Xbox One S or the 360 Slim is because the criteria the consoles had to meet to be included were according to what Aaron, from the channel Mr. Who's the Boss, put in his video. So without further ado, let's start with the console that started it all. The original Xbox debut in 2001, in a time where Microsoft was not in any way involved in console creation. Quite differently, they were pioneers in computer creation and developing games for that platform. But seeing as Sony's PS2, which was dominating the market, had the ability to play movies, they were afraid consoles would replace computers entirely and they would go bankrupt. So they created this console, and in a very similar way to how you would build a computer, making it the most powerful console in the world at the time, something that would resonate with Xbox consoles until today. It surpassed Nintendo's GameCube in sales with 24 million sales in total, inserting itself in the big gaming companies of the world. Its success was also possible due to its most recognizable franchise, Halo, which had its first game in this console. With such a big opening, I think it's fair to put the original Xbox on a tier. Next up is the Xbox 360. In my opinion, the most iconic Xbox console ever to be made. That may be perhaps because it was the first one I ever owned, until I gave it to my cousin. It was released in 2005, the same generation as the PS3, and I think it's safe to assume it is the best console of that generation. This one was even more powerful than the first one, allowing developers to make games like BioShock, Red Dead Redemption, and Halo 3, the best ever, for it. Another perk of Microsoft being a PC company is that they were way more experienced when it came to internet connection, and this console in particular was basically the starter of what would become competitive online gaming. Huge W for Microsoft. Unfortunately, the earliest models were many times plagued with the so-called Red Ring of Death, which would indicate the end of that console's lifetime. Luckily for me, I never went through it, and if I did, I don't know what I'd do. Xbox struck once again with something worthy of remembering, and for that I put it on S tier. After a couple years, and a few special editions of the 360, they released the Xbox 360 Slim, or just S, in 2010. Do not be deceived by the name however, since the hard drive had roughly 13 times more gigabytes than in the last console. Some other innovations made in this period were the use of a more power-efficient processor which mitigated the occurrences of the Red Ring of Death, the use of touch sensitivity buttons, and the first ever use of the Kinect add-on, which allowed players to use voice commands and motion controls to play games. There isn't much to say, since this console wasn't a brand new project, but rather a way to improve certain things on the Xbox 360, and to use its name to sell as much as possible. Along with the last one and their special edition, the Xbox 360 sold almost 86 million units in total. But since this model didn't offer many differences from its predecessors, it safely lands on A tier. Eventually, the 8th generation of video game consoles came, and Microwave released probably the biggest flop in their entire existence, the Xbox One. First off, the name is already misleading since it's not their first console. Secondly, the console was made in a way that you had to always be online for it to function. It wasn't an option. And it was marketed as a multimedia device, which shifted the focus away from the video games it offered. There were many other factors that made it sell badly, like its poor launch strategy, the Kinect add-on, which now came with the console raising the price, etc. It also didn't help that it was up against the PlayStation 4, and it was underpowered at that. It showed potential in certain aspects, like the controller, which was a big upgrade from the 360 one, and it was the first Xbox with backwards compatibility. The best aspects, however, would be revitalized in years to come and redeem the legacy of the Xbox One. But for now, the first model of this console only deserves a B. So Microsoft came with a whole new strategy, creating two console varieties in order to appeal to everyone. First, they released the Xbox One S, this one being smaller, white, and all the connecting cables were inside the console itself, so you didn't need to plug in anything. This console was the one that focused more, again, in the multimedia device aspects, so they upgraded the visual specs to 4000 Blu-ray, and with HDR support. Other innovations included the storage options. Depending on the price, you could get 500 gigabytes of storage, 1 terabyte or 2 terabytes. Also, the Connect was now optional to buy. Overall, it didn't change much, but the specs differences made it already superior, so I think it deserves an A. And then, just a year later, the second console came out, and in my opinion, the most underrated Xbox ever. The Xbox One X, which was the way of compensating for the One S, while the last one maintained the all-in-one entertainment system characteristics. This console was a flat-out gaming machine. It has a faster CPU, faster GPU, again supporting 4K graphics, 4 times the detail of 180p. It was 4.5 times faster than the original Xbox One. They also improved things like the controller design and added a whole new boot-up screen. I think Xbox really went back to its roots with this one being a powerhouse in gaming. It always kind of impressed me how this one is so much more powerful than the first Xbox One, while being even smaller. Game-wise, it had basically the same library of games, with all this additional power. Some game developers used it as an opportunity to create remastered definitive editions of their games, games such as Tomb Raider and Mafia, which are both peak. It was also after the release of this console that they came out with the now well-known Game Pass, a monthly subscription that lets you play hundreds of games, both exclusives and third-party games. In total, the Xbox Ones came to sell 58 million units, pretty good all things considered, and unlike the PS4, which I owned, the Xbox One X I used to play was owned by my friend. But like the PS4, I spent hundreds of hours of my youth playing this console, and call me crazy all you want, but I am putting it on S tier. So, the year 2020 finally came and Xbox decided to use the same strategy, releasing a smaller, weaker, a cheaper console, and a bigger, stronger, and more expensive one. So, starting with the Xbox Series S, a media-focused machine and the smaller of the two, is all digital, with 512 gigabytes of storage for just $300. While it is technically worse in terms of quality in comparison to the Xbox One X, it uses current-gen effects, like ray tracing for an example. It is the smallest Xbox ever, with no hard drive, so it may be an attempt to make people buy their subscription. This generation also features a brand new controller, which I included in a YouTube short a long time ago. The link for that video is in the description. It's impossible to argue that, for times we live in, the Series S isn't a good console for its price, which I will give a B for. It just doesn't seem to come close to its big brother. The Xbox Series X is a gaming-focused machine, including a hard drive for game discs. It has 1 terabyte of storage and it was $500 at launch. At the time of its release, it was the most powerful console in history, now being passed by the PS5 Pro. As of right now, it is Microsoft's flagship console, and that is for good reason. At its best, the Series X can render up to 8K resolution and 120 frames per second. And I'm not done talking about the quality of this. Compared to the One X, this console's CPU is 4 times as powerful and the GPU twice as powerful. As of right now, both these consoles have sold about 28 million units. Nothing astonishing, but alright. And though I would love to talk about the games, right now Microsoft isn't going through a particularly good phase, as most of their exclusive franchises are at the risk of either dying or being included on the PlayStation in the future. And speaking of PlayStation, when this generation came, most people despised the looks of these consoles, especially the PS5. And I'm going to say it, even though the Series X has a cool boxy, fridge-like design, I still think the PS5 looks better. I just like the weird space look. Okay, sue me. But anyways, in the last video, I placed the PS5 at A, saying the Xbox Series X might be a little more powerful, but I think the PS5 has gained more popularity since its release. And overall, I don't think the console has reached its full potential just yet. And now reflecting upon those statements, and seeing how some big releases have arrived at the PS5, and with the release of the PS5 Pro, the current most powerful console in history, I would have probably placed it at S because I think it is at the same level as the Series X, so in this video, I'll put the Series X at S tier. But just know that I think the PS5 should be at S2, despite the last video. Well, this is it. Those are all the Xbox consoles. Comment what you thought of this video and what more tier lists should I do, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.